Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for our webinar. Um, if you, when we have questions, you will be able to unmute yourselves. Doesn't look like we have anyone calling in, but if you are calling in, you can use *6 to unmute yourselves or *3 to raise your hand. So our guest presenter this morning is Stephen Sturdivant with EPA Region 6. With that, I will turn it over to Stephen. Stephen, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, I'm with the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 6, and today I'm going to talk about reducing our food print. Okay, so I'm hoping to share with you the why and the how on one of EPA's programs that we're trying to promote. Okay, so let's see. So first I'm going to go over some environmental impacts, that humans cause. And one of them happens to be water. So what you're looking at right now is a map of the United States, and each of those color shapes represents an underground water aquifer that the U.S. Geological Survey measured the water level in these aquifers. And all of those shapes, with the exception of the northwest corner, all the rest of the shapes, other than the blue one, what they found is that the water level is being depleted faster than the rate of recharge, which means we're pulling water out of the ground so fast that these aquifers don't have a chance to recharge. And at this rate, they will run dry. And um, a lot of communities are trying to figure out what are we going to do to, you know, uh, fill this need once this water resource runs out. And this groundwater is a source of drinking water for about half of the United States population. But the biggest user of this water is food production. So that's important, right? We want to know what's causing this impact so that we know how to address it. So it's food production. It's the irrigation of crops to grow food for humans or food for livestock. And this rate of withdrawal is unsustainable. So we need to address it. So food production. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a different impact. This is nutrient pollution. This is one of the most widespread and costly environmental challenges. It's nutrient pollution that gets in our rivers. It disrupts the ecosystem. It kills fish, and then it gets dumped into the Gulf, where it creates an ocean dead zone where marine life cannot live. And some of this stuff can be toxic. There's news reports of people walking their dogs and their dogs playing in the river and getting sick. So this is a huge issue. And the number one cause of nutrient pollution in our rivers is food production. It's the runoff from the farms, the nitrogen and phosphorus, the fertilizer, the animal wastes that when it rains, it washes off the farms and goes into the rivers and wreaks havoc on these ecosystems. So it's a huge impact, and food production is the cause. Let's talk about another impact: deforestation or biodiversity loss. You know, when I first became an environmentalist, I thought I need to recycle my paper, right? Or use less paper or less wood to help the forests. And that is good to do. But the number one cause of deforestation and biodiversity loss is food production. You may have heard about the fires in California, all the forests burning. Well, imagine setting fires to forests intentionally. Well, that's going on in places like the Amazon. Fire is being set intentionally to forests to make room to graze cattle and to grow livestock feed, mostly. And indigenous people are like trying to fight for their lands, and some of them are getting assassinated by trying to protect their lands. So this is a huge impact. And so now, if I want to help the forests or help biodiversity, I think about my food choices, right? So food waste alone here in the United States accounts for a quarter of our fresh water use, tons of energy, and enough land to feed the world's hungry, right? So that's a lot of land, that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of water. In fact, just the water used to grow the food you throw away takes more water than your entire household use. And when I first became an environmentalist, I was trying to take shorter showers and not water my car, my lawn, and don't wash my car, and doing all these things which are important. But I didn't realize to look in my trash can, like that's where most of my water was going. So now when I want to reduce my water use, I think about my food choices. Okay, one other impact, climate change. So I want to just give you guys an update. Climate change has a huge impact. It is human caused. It's the warming of our planet. There are estimates that tens of thousands of deaths will occur just here in the United States. Uh, Hundreds of thousands of deaths globally. Several hundred million will fall into poverty, and a couple billion will face extreme heat if we reach 2 degrees, and all of our coral reefs will be gone. That's a you know a huge disruption to ocean life. There was recently a big gathering of nations to try to address climate change, and the pledges that came out of that conversation gets us to about 2.4 degrees, which is not enough, folks. We need to get down to 1.5 degrees if we want to have our coral reefs, if we want to greatly reduce, those extreme heat communities. That's including the United States. We made a pledge that isn't enough, and we're struggling to even meet our own pledge, just like many countries. And here's the kicker: even if we completely eliminated fossil fuel use entirely, it would still not be enough to get us to 1.5 degrees. Our food system emissions alone would use up the entire carbon budget to keep us under 1.5 degrees. So our food choices play an important role, as well as fossil fuels. Okay, so let's talk about food waste. There's a lot of things we can do with our food, to make our food system more sustainable. And one thing is to address food waste. And that's what I'm going to talk mainly about here today. So here in the United States, we waste over a third of our food. That's plenty to feed everyone that's hungry in this country. And the United States, per person, wastes more food than any other country. So there's definitely room for improvement here in the United States to reduce food waste. Okay, so where is food being wasted along the supply chain? You've got here, there's food waste all along the supply chain, from the farm to distribution to retail to consumers. What was surprising is that consumers and consumer-facing businesses, that's the blue and the red, make up a big chunk. So it's even, I'm part of this. As a consumer, I can definitely play a role in reducing food waste. So what can you do with food waste, right? Well, you can donate it, you can compost it, you can send it to a landfill, you can prevent food waste, try to reduce your food waste. And what this graph is showing is the greenhouse gas emissions benefits of different waste management options. So you have here, for example, landfilling. And here, this shows that there is emissions above zero happening at the landfill itself. So this is like the methane happening at the landfill. Now, if you compost food waste, right, you remove that landfill methane and you sequester a little bit of carbon too. But look over here at source reduction. Source reduction, you eliminate the entire carbon footprint of that food by preventing food waste to begin with, right? So this is things like waste prevention, like figuring out why you're wasting food, changing your habits, changing your purchasing or your preparation so that um, you eliminate that food waste from ever occurring, and that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck. That's really a way to greatly reduce our emissions footprint. And why is that? Well, if you look along the supply chain, you see you've got a lot of resources going in, and then you have impacts coming out like greenhouse gas emissions. So right here down at the bottom shows where the greenhouse gas emissions are occurring along the supply chain. And as you can see, a big chunk of it happens during the production, right? Some of it's happening during distribution and processing. All of this is happening before it even reaches you, right? So once you generate food waste, your options are limited as far as trying to impact the emissions that have occurred. That's why source reduction is so important. You can actually get at the primary production emissions that are occurring. And this is farm level emissions. Mostly it's nitrous oxide emissions that occur from the fertilizer being applied to the farms, to the soil. It's the working with the soil and the fertilizer and the and that's the fertilizer that's being applied to both, crops fed directly to humans and crops fed to livestock. And then you have enteric fermentation, which is solely from livestock. That's a methane emission. And then you have animal wastes as well that emit methane and nitrous oxide. And then you have the land itself, right? Using the land can change its, you know, ability to sequester or emit carbon. So that's why source reduction is so important. Also, if you want to get at some of these other resources, land, fertilizer, pesticide, water, all of that is being put into primary production. So if you want to reduce that water use or that land use, you have to go with source reduction, right? Preventing that food waste to begin with. And that is why the EPA has this food recovery hierarchy of the most preferred to least preferred options for food waste management. That's why source reduction is here at the very top. We want to prevent food waste from happening to begin with. We want to exhaust that option first. Before we even talk about composting, we need to prevent that food waste first. So if you're implementing a program, please, that's step number one. And then let's try to get that food to hungry families and so on down the list. Okay. So what does food waste look like? What is it made up? Here are different food categories that make up the food waste. You've got meat, poultry, and eggs. You've got dairy, a little bit of fish, grains, and so on, fruits and vegetables. So you may take a look at this, and these are different. These come from different sources. And this graph comes from an EPA Office of Research and Development report that just came out, and you have a link here at the bottom to take a look at that report. It's got a lot of great information. You may take a look at this chart and see, oh, it looks like there's several papers that agree that fruits and vegetables are wasted the most. So maybe we should focus on fruits and vegetables. However, what I'm going to do next is overlay the greenhouse gas emissions impact of these different food categories. And as you can see, it tells a totally different story. So if your goal is to reduce emissions, this is what it looks like per food category. You see that it's vastly different. And this is what it looks like per pound of different food category, the emissions impact. These are from 4 different sources. So you can start to see that different foods have different impacts on the environment. So there's a similar story with agricultural land use. You see the land use distributed by food category, and this is the food that we waste. Okay, we've got here one for fertilizer. We've got water use and pesticides. Okay, so one really great source reduction idea that you could implement is conducting a food waste audit. So it's important to know what you're throwing away and why. Only then can you figure out things to do differently to prevent that waste, right? So we really encourage food waste audits. I've done several of them and would love to help you do a food waste audit at your organization, whether it's a school or university or restaurant. I want to help. And here's an example of a school food waste audit. And it really just boils down to 4 easy steps. Okay. So if you look over here at this little diagram, you've got here at the bottom, step 1, right? And what you're seeing is 2 different tables that you set up, and you got a bunch of buckets that you put on the back table. And then the front table is where the students come to drop off their food waste when they're done eating. So instead of taking their food waste to a trash can, they take it to this table right here. And when they do, you have here step 2, an interviewer just jots down real quick on a clipboard what the student is throwing away, what type of food, and then they just ask the student, hey, I noticed you didn't finish your mashed potatoes. Can you tell me why? And then they just write down the reason why. And step 3, that's where other volunteers take the tray and with gloves separates the items into different buckets so that you can weigh them later and get the weights of the different food types. And then step 4 is definitely important. You want to have someone that switches out the trash cans because there's going to be a lot of non-food waste. So you need to be there to when those trash cans fill up, just roll them out, to a closet or to the dumpster and stay on top of that. And it runs pretty smoothly. You get a lot of great information. So I'm going to dive into some pictures and more details so that you can get really familiar with this process. Okay, so here's a picture, an example of what one food waste audit looks like. You just, you take what you can find, just some buckets, you slap some labels on them. And, the labels, you can take a look at what the menu is that day and talk with the kitchen staff and get an idea of, what labels you want to put on your buckets. Make sure to have a miscellaneous bucket. You never know what you'll get. But try to label buckets to where you're capturing everything. And you got some clipboards here, some gloves, and that's it. And you just find a spot to set up your station. Okay. So this is just an example of a lunchroom. So when I enter a lunchroom, I want to figure out before my audit, where's the best spot to put this audit station, right? It's going to take up a couple of tables. It's going to take up some space. So I need to know where students are coming and going. Where do they congregate? Where do they typically go to drop off food waste? Where do the lines, once the lines get long, where do they kind of typically go? So that you have a station where you are visible but out of the way, so that students can kind of temporarily come there, do a quick interview, and walk, and you're not disturbing the flow. Now, trash cans. Right before the audit, you want to remove all the trash cans, hide them, because if students are using them, that's going to affect your data. So you want to remove all those trash cans and maybe do like an announcement or signage to direct students to the audit table. Right? You don't want to let on what you're doing, really. You don't want to change their behavior, but you just want to let them know, hey, when you're done with your food trays, please bring them over to this table. We've um, something like that. And okay, so this is a collection of pictures taken from some of these food audits. These are trays that were done, folks. These are students that were done with their food and ready to throw them away. And this is what they typically look like. Look at that. And so I want to ask you a question. When you first see these pictures and you see that this is all waste, what do you like naturally look at first? I know when I first became an environmentalist and I looked at these pictures and knew that this was waste, my eyes went directly to the plastic. I don't know about you, but you look at that styrofoam, you see those plastic packagings, and you think to yourself, gosh, what can we do? Right? What can we do better to reduce the amount of plastic waste? And a lot of schools are throwing a lot of money at this. They're trying to buy reusable trays, or compostable, more eco-friendly materials. Um, and that's great and that's important. But before, I didn't even look at the food. I never thought to look at the food and think, oh my gosh, we need to do something about that. At first, I thought of food as just something inert. It's non-hazardous. It's going to turn into dirt. So what's the matter throwing it away? It's not going to harm anything. But now when I see that food, I see all that water and all that land and greenhouse gas emissions that have occurred because of my choices. So now I see the food. And that's hopefully the one thing that everyone takes away today, is that they see the food. Okay. So here's just some examples of what the buckets might look like. You can tell that different foods are going into each bucket. And then over here on the right, you have just a really cheap scale, and you can find them online. They're called luggage scales. They're for like weighing your luggage when you go to the airport, but they work perfectly for weighing these buckets, and they're really cheap. So once you're done with the buckets, you just weigh them, and then you empty the bucket. Now, if you're collecting milk waste, be sure to go ahead and weigh the bucket when it's half full. You don't want that bucket to be totally full of milk. So go ahead and empty that. And then food waste is really heavy. So don't wait until the trash can is completely full. At the end of the audit, you might have a tendency to empty all the buckets in one trash can. Don't do that. It's going to be too heavy. So, you might have to take a couple of trips. Don't fill the trash can up all the way with food waste. That's something that I learned the hard way. But it's not a big deal. Just, fill it up, do half your buckets on one trash bag and do another half your buckets on another trash bag. Not a big deal. Okay, trying to share with you tips so that you have an easier time. Okay, here's just a quick picture of the survey, right? You've got a student volunteer with a clipboard asking a student, hey, what about those carrots? Why did you not eat those carrots? So you need to be careful with some of these audits, because the first time I did it, I got a lot of the reasons for not finishing something was I didn't like it, which is probably true, but it's not useful information, right? So we ask our students to do a rebuttal. Like, okay, you don't like it, but can you tell me why you didn't like it? Was there something about the taste or the texture or the temperature? Or were you full? Like, what was the reason why? So try to capture that detail. Okay, so when you weigh the buckets, you can get something kind of like this, just an idea of what's being tossed by a different food category. Now, this is the weight of the food, and I would actually encourage you to also measure the greenhouse gas emissions impact, right? So taking the same exact data, and instead of by weight, which is what you're seeing here, you see that rolls and mashed potatoes take up a big portion of it. But if you measure it by greenhouse gas emissions, you see that it's steak fingers that may be something you want to look into. That's comprising a big chunk of the emissions from that food waste. So it may change your priorities on what you want to address. So here are examples of some of the survey sheets, right? You just write down on the left column what food they're wasting, and then you write down the reason why, what the reason that they gave. And here are some examples of some of that data collected. So for example, apples were being tossed, and the most popular reason why was because they were bruised. That's an example, right? Or the nachos were too cold, or the fries were too dry. Okay, or the pizza was too greasy, right? That could be maybe an easy fix in the kitchen, right? Let's make the pizza a little less greasy. Maybe kids will enjoy it more and not throw it away. And look at this one, stir fry. There was a huge common reason, too much sauce. This was interesting. When the chef saw this, he was shocked. He had no idea that this was a reason why students were throwing away his stir fry that he was so proud of. So all he had to do was go back to the kitchen staff, tell them, hey, let's put less sauce in the stir fry. Now they're saving money on sauce, and the students are happier. So it's a win-win for everyone, for people and planet. So this is an example of some of the great data that can come out of these audits. Okay. And I would also encourage you, especially at schools and universities, to have a donation category, right? You may not be able to fit all this in a bucket, but have like a section or like a part of a table designated to what I would call items that could have been donated, right? So that's what you're looking at. These are pictures of items that were not even opened, not even a little bit. They were completely sealed, not open, still contamination free foods that could have been donated if the school had a donation program. So these pictures, I think, are very powerful. It can help encourage and rally support around a possible program with your school to implement a donation, either like a share table or have actually a nonprofit come and collect this food and take it away so that this food can get to hungry families or after school programs. There's a lot of different ways to design it, but thought that was very powerful. Wanted to show those pictures. These are all foods that could have been donated but were tossed. And this is one lunch period. Each of these pictures was one lunch period. Okay. So donation is super important. What you're seeing here is a picture of Dallas here in the middle. All these little purple dots, purple and green dots, represents a feeding organization, some organization trying to feed hungry families. And I was just shocked to realize in my hometown how many of these places are there. Pantries, soup kitchens, food banks that are trying to help get food to hungry families. And what I was also shocked to realize is a lot of them absolutely want this food. They want food donations. I didn't realize this, but a lot of them have to pay for the food that they feed to hungry families. They get a huge discount, don't get me wrong, but they still have to spend money on that food. Even the food they get from food banks, they have to spend money and buy that food. So if you're able to donate food directly to these nonprofits, or have someone just come in a car and pick up that food, they're super grateful because that's money they don't have to spend, and they can reallocate that money to maybe other social services, to help these families. So they absolutely want this food, and I can help provide assistance. I can reach out to to these organizations in your community if you like, and see, what their setup is like. Do they have a commercial kitchen? What can they accept? That sort of thing. And I can also help get in touch with your local health department, and check in with them, make sure that we're meeting all of their requirements as well. So a lot of people are afraid of donation. They think it's illegal. They think they'll get sued. You hear all of these things, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of times they told you this just to make you go away. If you ever go to a grocery store and ask them, hey, can I get your leftover food and take it to a soup kitchen? They may say, oh no, I can't do that. It's illegal, right? Well, here you are getting encouragement from a federal agency right now saying it is not illegal to donate food. Uh, there are protections even. There's encouragement. The EPA as well as the USDA at a federal level encourage food donation. The FDA encourages food donation, even shows you how to do it. It's absolutely legal. So, and also, Nicole Savita, I had the opportunity to meet. She worked with the University of Arkansas School of Law, and she said she has never come across a single case where an organization was sued for donating food. The case just doesn't exist from when she looked at it. So uh, you're protected. There's something called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, which protects businesses at the federal level from liability. So this guy talks about that. It talks about how it's perfectly legal and fine to donate food. So this is a great little guide that might help calm people's anxieties about donating food. You can also get a tax break on food donations, and there's a guide for that. Okay, so now I want to go into this food waste audit guide a little bit more. We have this available online. Here's the web link here at the bottom corner, but I can also email it to you. It's super easy to read, and I'm going to just burn through it real quick. Let's see. I'm going to get my copy of it up here. Let's see the final. There it is. Okay. So that looks okay, maybe. So this is specific to schools, but it can work for any establishment. Super easy. I'm gonna just go through it real quick. Um, we're gonna jump into planning your audit. Right, you got easy steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3. I recommend about 4 volunteers for every 100 students. Okay, so when you have a lunch period, try to figure out how many students come into that lunch period. And then you need student volunteers to help you, right? And so I've had a real easy time with about 4 volunteers for every 100 students. Okay? And then 1 audit station for every 200 students. Right? So if you have 400 students coming in, maybe you have a couple of different audit stations set up and you have 8 volunteers, something like that. Okay? And you can make do with less, right? You don't have to get every single tray, but I do try to encourage it. So even if you have 2 people, you can still, collect how many trays as you can. It's not a big deal. Okay, so yeah, just little steps like that, super easy. Yeah, the more buckets, the better, I say. Here's just a quick list of the items needed. Get your gloves. Get your weigh scale, your clipboards, things like that. This is interesting. This is for your student volunteers who want to be interviewers, right? And man, these kids are great. One unintended benefit of these audits is getting kids interested in the environment and getting them interested in helping the environment you know, when you talk to these kids and you tell them, hey, this is what we're going to do with this food waste audit, and here's why. And once they're doing the food waste audit, they see all the food that's being tossed out, and they're it's something's clicking in their heads. And I see some of these students, some of their friends come up and throw away food, and they're talking to their friends, man, why are you throwing all this food away, right? They get a little passionate about it, and it's really great to see, because I don't know, they start to get interested, right, in the environment, and it's really cool to see that. And that's another benefit, I think, of these audits is the volunteers get to experience this. So this is just a little example of kind of an interview. The interviewer might notice the chicken lo mein and ask, hey, why didn't you finish your chicken lo mein? The student may say, I didn't like it, right? But we want better data. So the interviewer may come back and say, hey, what about it didn't you like? And then maybe the students might say, oh, it was kind of cold, right? Okay, so cold. Maybe there's something we can do about that. So those are just some examples. Super easy, quick steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have food separators, right? These are the volunteers that put food into different buckets. Okay, and just some quick tips for them. Day of the audit, just kind of prepping the area, get rid of the trash cans, set up your station, that kind of thing. This talks a little bit about data collection, and then I showed you those. These are just some other tips you can do. And then at the bottom, you have this is an example of an interview sheet, right? The interviewer will have this on their clipboard: type of food, reason for loss, and just, an extra column for other ideas, try to get feedback from the students. And then this is where you log in the weight of the buckets. Okay. And that's it. That's the end of the guide. Super easy, right? This guide is available online, and I can also email it to you. Okay, let's jump back into the PowerPoint real quick. We're almost done. So that's the audit guide. Super fun. Now, if you don't want to do a full-on food waste audit and have a bunch of volunteers, maybe you can't get the volunteers or approval to do it during the lunch period, or maybe you want a social distance, there is a second option. It's called a food waste sort. Okay, this is basically an audit after everything's been thrown into the trash can. So it's a little messier, I'm not going to lie, but you can still collect some data. You're not going to figure out why the food is being tossed, unfortunately. That's a crucial part of the interview, but you can at least figure out what you're throwing away and how much. You want to first, do this outside, maybe get a tarp or, a place where you can hose it off. And you want to get the trash bags, put them down in one area, remove all the big, recyclable items, move all that non-food items out, and then you want to put it over to the table where it's just food waste that's left. You throw it right on the table and then throw it in the buckets, and you get those buckets that way. So that's just a second option. This is an example of what it might look like, and imagine putting gloves on and sifting through this. It's not for everyone, but I don't know, some people have fun with it. So okay, some other real quick ideas. Share tables. I can help connect you with your local health department to make sure you have share tables that meet your local requirements. This is where students can just drop off unwanted items at a table where other students can come and get an extra item if they want. We also have other tips you can do, not just food waste audits. Tips of things you can do at home to reduce food waste. We've got a lot of that. There's an app to help you store food to make it last longer. And then a lot of schools are doing composting, and I can definitely talk about that if you guys want to reach out. We have the EPA waste reduction model. This can help you crank out how much emissions you're saving, right? And it breaks it down to a different type of food waste as well, so you can get pretty granular with the data. And here's a tool that you can throw that number into and come out with great equivalencies. How many cars did you take off the road through your activity? So that's kind of fun. And then these are just like some social media posts, pictures that you're welcome to use, put up at school on your walls or online. You're welcome to have these. Okay. And this is my contact information. Please email me. I want to help provide assistance and get these resources to you, and I can help train your students or help get you connected with a hungry family feeding charity. Whatever I can do to help reduce food waste, I'm here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
Are there any questions for Stephen? Okay, so while everyone's thinking of their question to ask, I have a couple of questions, Stephen. Um, what school grades do you typically do the food waste audits? Do you do like high school or just all elementary, or and have you found if you do the high school versus the elementary, are there differences in the food waste items?
Yeah, there are absolutely. And that's a good point to bring up. I've done food waste audits at elementary schools, high schools, and universities. And with with the schools, uh, a lot of them are kind of easier to handle. They'll come in their own cup or their own package, and it's a lot easier to separate that food out. We get a lot of different reasons for food waste at elementary schools, um, and also high schools. Like a lot of times, food waste items were tossed because it was put on their tray automatically. Like they didn't even select it from the line; it was just put on their tray, and so they didn't have a chance to reject that item. And so, I think there's a lot of reasons that go into that. Um, Sometimes schools, they try to meet the USDA requirements for free and reduced lunch program, and a lot of times they're confused as to what is required. For example, you can have fruit or a vegetable, but you don't have to have both, right? And sometimes they'll put both on the tray, and that's just like a ton of food for these kids. Or like they'll put the milk on the tray, which is not a required item, and some students are lactose intolerant, so there was like a lot of milk cartons, a lot of milk waste happening at elementary schools. And then once you get up to high schools and colleges, the items tend to be a little messier, right? Because it's less packaging, more like just on a tray or on a plate. So just what I would recommend is whatever day of the week, see if you can go on a previous week where that same menu is being served, and just make sure to tell how that food is being presented. Is it in its own little container or cup, or is it kind of mixed in with other stuff? And that can kind of give you an idea of how you're going to separate out that food. You may not be able to separate out certain items from each other. So that'll give you a good idea there. We definitely got better answers from the older kids. The younger kids tend to be more shy, which is fine, um, but it's still a lot of fun. You know, that sort of thing. I did them at you can do them at restaurants too. I've done a waste sort at a restaurant. I was trying to get them to let us interview their customers, but they were very protective. So we only could do a sort at a restaurant. But universities, high schools, and elementary schools are great for the interview because the students engage each other, and it's a lot of fun, and you can get plenty of volunteers to do it. So
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Also, for if, say, if we're thinking of doing a food audit at a school, would you suggest a certain age group for your first audit that's easier, or, what would you suggest as a first audit, as a, practice run?
Yeah, I would say, your older kids, middle school, high school, I think they're going to understand, the environmental concept more. and give, more useful um, responses in the interview, and they tend to eat more food, right? Just in volume. So I would suggest, your older kids, middle school, high school for sure. But you can definitely do this at elementary level, no problem.
Thank you. It looks like we have a question in the comment in the chat box. Do you see it, Stephen?
Okay, let's do that. I'm gonna click on
Okay.
the chat. Oh, from Heaven Lucero, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I apologize if I didn't. Looks like the question reads, are you aware of community fridges? I've seen some videos recently where people, and even some restaurants, donate to this fridge with leftover foods. For an example, a bakery would donate bread that is still good because they are required to sell fresh bread daily. The community fridge pantry would be available for everyone. I just thought it was interesting to hear about different efforts to reduce food waste. I've seen that as well. These community pantries or fridges, plugged into the wall, keeping things cold. I I think it's a great concept. Um, there was a university campus that bought like an old fridge for like $50, and just with that one little fridge, they were able to have students with backpacks go around to all the vendors on their campus and just grab, the one or two, breakfast sandwiches or the one or two apples or whatever it was, and just throw it in this little fridge. It was like in one of the, faculty lounges or whatever, and they were able to just toss it in that fridge, and then they were able to have someone come, a few days later to pick up all the stuff. So yeah, fridges I think can be cheap. You can find them online, used, real cheap. Uh, yeah, I strongly recommend that for sure. Great idea. Thank you.
Any other questions for Stephen?
Yeah, Stephen, this is Wayne Isaacs with Cherokee Nation. And I was wondering, sir, when you're approaching these schools and institutions, are they all pretty receptive for allowing you to do this, or is it just a flat no, we don't want that done?
So I I do my best to reach out as best I can, and a lot of times I'm invited, so that's nice, right? Because there's already someone there, whether it's a sustainability staff person or other faculty, or it's a kitchen staff, maybe it's the head chef. They'll sometimes reach out to me, say, "Hey, I want to do this," and so I'm invited. So my my experience is a little skewed because of that, right? But I do remember there was one school that was when I approached them because there was one staff that wanted to do it and invited me. Uh, there were other staff that were very comprehensive about it. Sorry, apprehensive. They were apprehensive about it, and they were concerned that the students would not get to class on time, that it would slow them down, it would cause a huge mess, a huge backup. Um, you know, all these kids would get late passes and things, and it was great that I was able to be there in person to reassure them, hey, I've done this many times, without a hiccup. It runs real smooth. If we can't get all the students to drop off their trays, and do the interview, we just tell them to just go ahead and drop your tray and go to class. So that's why, like, you have two big tables, right there. And worst case scenario, students can just come up and just drop their tray on that table and leave, and it's not a big deal. It's just as quickly as just taking to the trash can. And I guess saying that to the staff, letting them know that there's always this like default option of just doing what you do every day, is that option is always there. They kind of relax a little bit about it, but honestly, they had anxiety all the way up to the audit. But once we were done with the audit, and there were, all the students were happy and having fun, and we were collecting this data, and he was seeing all of these like donation items piling up and these different buckets piling up, and kids, having an easy time. They really jumped in, they really enjoyed it, and they um, were excited at that point. I don't know, it's just you're entering their space, and they do have headache, right? They have to orchestrate this madness every day in the lunchroom. And but if you're there, you're kind of taking care of things for them. They don't really have to like lift a finger, and you just reassure them of that, and let them know that it's going to run smoothly. It kind of calms them down a bit. But if you run into anyone like that, just have them call me, and I'll chat them up. Yeah, I
Are
also
there,
put my email in the chat. I really want y'all to reach out to me. If you want those fun social media posters, or if you want uh, the ORD report that had all of those food waste statistics, or if you want me to help show you how to use the WARM model, or help you get connected with a nonprofit, or to help you do a food waste audit, or if you want the guide sent to you, please send me an email and chat me up. I'd love to help. Yeah.
are there any other questions? And I was going to mention that Stephen had sent me the guide for the audits, so I have a copy of it also. If you want to reach out to me, also I can send that to you. And Stephen, if you don't mind, can you share this presentation with me? And then if anyone would like a copy of it, you can email me or Stephen. We'll be glad to send that out to you guys.
Of course.
Any other questions? We still have a couple of minutes left in our time slot, so
While folks are thinking of questions, um, I'd like to propose that I share a couple of tips that I do at home as well to reduce food waste, if y'all are interested.
yes, please.
Okay. So some of these things that I do at home may not apply to your home. Just wanted to put that disclaimer out there, but these are some of the things that I do at my house that helps me reduce food waste. So one thing I do is when I go to my fridge, I'm a very visual person, and if there's an item being hidden behind another item in the fridge, I tend to forget about it. So I try to do the one layer method, where all my items in the fridge are for the most part one layer. I'm able to see every single item when I open that fridge. And I also try to get a small fridge, right? Just to challenge me to not stockpile a bunch of perishable foods that I may not get to. I see that having a smaller fridge allows me an easier time to um, keep track of everything and use it up before it goes bad. And for me, I like to zero down my fridge. I like to see the back of my fridge once in a while. It tells me that I'm actually using up all the food. And I zero it down, and my fridge is almost empty sometimes when I go to the grocery store, because that shows that I am using up this food and it's not going to waste. And I have my pantry, for emergencies, but that fridge is where a lot of stuff spoils. Okay, I also treat my freezer as my last resort. If there is something in my fridge that's about to go bad, I throw it in that freezer and stop that clock, right? So that I can get to it later. When I meal prep, I put things in smaller containers so that when I take it out of the freezer, it's just a small portion that I have a better opportunity to use up before it goes bad. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of a small guy, so meals at restaurants are really big. So I like to split meals with people and save money. Really, when I go to a restaurant, it's about the interaction with the people, anyways. So I'll order something small, and I'll top off the tank at home if I need to. And you know what? Something easy, right? A grocery list. I've done this so many times. I go to the grocery store, buy something, only to come home and find out I already have the item. So I have to do like a run through of the pantry and fridge and get that grocery list. Do it. Um, I get discounted produce, try to chop it up, throw it in the freezer, use it in soups and smoothies. And don't be afraid to buy the ugly stuff, folks. you know, sometimes bruises are good. Like bananas, I wait until they're super freckly to buy them. Um, just because it's oddly shaped or it has a couple of blemishes on it doesn't mean it's not bad. You know, if you see a little fuzz on it, then you might want to stay away. But if it's just a bruise or if it's just a weird shape, go for that ugly produce. It's going to help tell the grocery store, hey, these items are in demand. So you don't have to be too picky with the farmer either, because the farmer's trying to sell this stuff. So that's what I do. Um, knowing stuff is ripe. You know, go online, go to check out some videos online. There's some really great tips on how to tell if like a pear, you know, or you know, an avocado is ripe, so that you watch this video once and you're armed with knowledge. Uh, okay, I try to throw everything in an airtight container. It helps it last longer. Treat your food like flowers. This is fun. You can do this with foods like kale. You know, just cut off the bottom of the stems, put it in a jar of water, throw it in the fridge. It'll stay nice and perky for longer. Um, if you're wasting a lot of fruit and veg, you can try frozen or canned. If you're getting canned, make sure to do low sodium or low sugar. Um, and buy, you know, buy smaller portions if you're not getting through it. Don't fall for the discounted large bag if you're not going to be able to use up everything in that bag. And remember, you can always chop it up and throw it in the freezer for later. And store your food like your grocery store. Um, for example, if you go to the grocery store and they're just putting food out, like just out in the middle of the room, then maybe that can stay out of your fridge. Or if they're putting it in the cold section, put it in your cold section. If they got the misters on, you might want to put it in your crisper drawer in the fridge. You know, little tips like that. Yeah. So
Great tips.
yeah, great tips.
We have another question in the chat box.
Have you ever audited a casino's food waste? You know, I have not, but I have heard of um, casinos that have like buffets, and they are able to take a lot of those buffet trays and get them donated. I have seen that. I have seen casinos take an interest in food waste and, you know, implement a program for sure. But I haven't had the opportunity to do an audit at a casino, but I would love to. So if any of you on the phone can help connect me with a casino, I would love to help them.
Are there any other questions for Stephen? I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but if you guys have a question afterwards, you can email me and I can forward it on to Stephen. With that, I think we are done with this webinar. Thank you, Stephen, for the presentation. That was some really good information. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And again, if you need Stephen's email address, please let me know, or I will share the audit guide and the presentation. So just let me know, and everyone have a good day, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.